our friend Gwen Moore. We welcome her back to the Devil's Advocates Radio Show. Welcome, Gwen.
Hey, Gwen.
Bruce, how you doing?
I'm doing excellent. It was great to see you in D.C., sort of closer to your element the day Speaker Mike Johnson, MAGA Mike Johnson, was elected. Gwen, I saw you outside the Longworth building that day. You've gotten to know him a little bit. He's been the speaker now for going on 2 weeks. First impressions, Gwen. How's Speaker MAGA Mike doing?
Well, I'll tell you, it was terrifying. I should have been more suspicious when this unknown person was being pushed very hard by known members of the Freedom Caucus. And he certainly lived up to his reputation as a member of the Freedom Caucus. First thing he did was to put a supplemental bill on the floor to support Israel, $14 billion, and a pay for by taking all of the money, taking $14 billion from the money that we need to catch, billionaire, multi-billionaire tax cheats away from the IRS. So, usually you would consider something like an Israeli supplemental as an emergency funding effort, and there would not need to be an offset. But he was able to execute, I'll say, one of the major priorities of the Republican Party, and that is to protect the top 1% in their money from paying their fair share taxes.
And Gwen,
so that's what he did.
Well, Gwen, and there's some question, even if what he rolled out, this funding, this aid for Israel, even if the cuts to the IRS were palatable, where's the funding for the Ukraine? Why are these things not being packaged? I mean, even Mitch McConnell, not often considered a moderate, but even Mitch McConnell said, you got to package these things up. We need like $105 billion. Joe Biden's on board. Where are the House Republicans?
Well, I mean, you just have really, he talked about the real dichotomy in the Republican, the Senate Republicans and the House Republicans. I mean, we've known for a long time that there are plenty of very vocal members of the Republican Party in the House that don't want to provide any funding for Ukraine. And presidential candidates in the Republican Party that don't want to fund Ukraine. So this is not a new problem. What has changed really is that they are now in charge. And so they deliberately left that funding out. And if that funding is restored, it'll have to be because the Senate puts it back in a package that comes back to us.
Folks, you're listening to the Devil's Advocates Radio Show. That is Congresswoman Gwen Moore, my Congresswoman. Gwen, love talking to you. Thanks for coming around. Last night, an election in several states here in the great country of the USA. 1 year out, Gwen, from the presidential. A lot of folks looking to last night as the tea leaves, perhaps. Is this something that we can predict? It looked like it went pretty well for the Dems. Abortion still going to be a big issue. Weed still an issue. What was your takeaway from the elections last night, Gwen?
Well, I'm going to tell you, quite frankly, I was terrified at the beginning of the day because, of course, I know you're going to talk about the doggone Marquette polls that show where Joe Biden is. But what happened in Virginia and Ohio, some rather bellwether states, we saw a trend that's very similar to past trends. When Virginia, for example, despite all the money the governor spent, Youngkin, he lost both the House and the Senate. And that's a real bellwether for who the next president is going to be. It demonstrates really fully that a Democratic president is likely. Ohio, for God's sake, a state where, Democrats have absolutely no hope, realistically, of winning. The fact that they legalized recreational marijuana and put in the Constitution a constitutional right to choose to have an abortion, I think portends well for Sherrod Brown's reelection as in the U.S. Senate. He's established, and it looks like, to borrow a word that may be a dirty word to some people, but it looks like the folks in Ohio are woke. Looks like they are not asleep as to what Republicans have in mind for their, subjection. And so I am those two places. I was really shocked. And of course, we had a Democratic governor in Kentucky, but I mean, he outperformed himself winning last night and really picked up a lot of constituencies that had been ruby red. And so while I thought Mississippi gubernatorial race was a long shot, we still saw the gap close quite a bit. And so I have a much better feeling this morning, today, than I did before these polls came in. And then, of course, we can just always mention Sheila Jackson Lee emerging out of that. I don't know how many people were on that ballot for Houston. It must have been a dozen to 12, 13, 14, 15, something like that. And so she emerged with 35% of the vote to 43% of the vote for Whitmer. And so there's going to be a runoff there. And of course, Houston is a Democratic city, so it doesn't really speak volumes to your question at all. But I think, what we're seeing is that people are engaged, people are willing to come out and vote, in an off, season. And of course, 2024 is the presidential when we expect most voters to decide to vote. So I think that Dems have a really good base to work from.
Gwen, I feel you. I've been so concerned of late, taking a lot of losses here on this side over the years. It was great to wake up this morning and see those results roll in. But of course, it's not just the election. It's also the get out the vote effort. It's the door knocking. It's the activism. It's people being engaged in self-governance. We had Wisconsin Dems chair Ben Wickler on the show yesterday talking about, the effort to get out to vote. We're 1 year out, Gwen. How are you feeling about the efforts as it stands right now?
Well, listen, maybe you could tell me something that I don't know, since the Republicans have held me hostage in D.C. for 9 weeks. And I literally have come home on Saturday morning and come back, late Sunday night to keep up with the schedule. But I had heard from, Spectrum One that the Republicans up there are trying to prevent get out the vote efforts, nonpartisan GOT efforts, TV efforts. And I'm wondering if Ben Wickler talked about that. I mean, that would be horrible. It seems from what I hear that this initiative to stop GOTV vote, get out the vote efforts, has passed the assembly twice. So, I don't want to speak out of turn here, but I'm wondering if you have any light to shed on what's going on there.
Well, Gwen, it is my impression that this constitutional amendment, because they're also they're putting up other things like, should illegal aliens, as they would describe them, should they be able to vote here in the nation? Well, these are get out the vote efforts on behalf of the conservatives, of course. They think by putting these sort of problematic issues on the ballot that they're going to churn out theirs, Gwen. The get out the vote efforts that are going on with the GOP, they're actually door knocking in Milwaukee. We understand from reporting of John King at CNN and Angela Lang and Block. There was a long article that CNN did on them, Gwen, but they point out the GOP, the Republicans, are door knocking in Milwaukee. I'm not going to say they're making inroads, but I'm not sure if they're there to try to turn them out or keep them home, Gwen.
Exactly, because I've gotten pieces of literature from the Republican effort. I think they're just interested in point shaving. And it's not about winning. It's about depressing the vote, it's lying to our constituents, sort of, casting doubt in people's minds about our leadership so that people will stay at home to discourage voting. I mean, I think it's a very cogent strategy. And they're unable to wholesale convince African Americans and Hispanics and people of color, for example, to support them. So they'll just discourage them. Of course, they play games with women as well. They're trying now to back away from their strident opposition to abortion rights by saying, well, I know you really, Democrats would allow you to have an abortion right up until the time of birth, and we know you oppose that. And so I think that they've got all kinds of tricks up their sleeves, and we better be aware. If they're going door to door in Milwaukee, we're going to have to match that and follow through with our own door to door conversation.
Gwen, it was 5 years ago yesterday that Scott Walker was defeated here in the state of Wisconsin. Do you still have some warm, fuzzy memories of the morning after that election, Gwen?
Oh, absolutely. Scott Walker is personal and political. Political because he was bound in terms to deliver blows. No matter how much it costs people.
Gwen, hold that thought. We'll come back. That's you singing the Scott Kevin Walker Blues. More Devil's Advocates. More with Congresswoman Gwen Moore. Gwen, appreciate you sticking around. That wasn't fair. I asked you to remember when Scott Walker lost. That's sort of a memory we should all relish for just a minute. Right. It wasn't quite fair to you, Gwen. But
I actually relish that. Honestly, it's been a long time since I've sat on the Joint Committee on Finance. But just his not taking the money for the ACA, the Affordable Care Act, and providing coverage for more low-wage workers, people working that need health care, it's got to be at this point close to $1 billion hit to our budget. Just the orneriness and the partisanship, he's leaving all this money on the table. I mean, that's despicable. And every time, I sat on that bullet train in China when I went to visit and thought about how fast that transportation is. And I just practically boo-hooed when I thought about the $800 million that he wouldn't allow us to have upgrades in public transportation. Just being partisan and not wanting Milwaukee to have any quote unquote wins. And then I thought about how, I had put together in my freshman year with then Senator Brian Burke, the Regional Transportation Authority, how when he got into office, that was one of the first things he destroyed because I, at that point, had been the only person who defeated him. So, of course, he had to undo everything that I had done. He just was a destroyer of anything that could really benefit great numbers of people and create economic impact. It wasn't, not taking that affordable care money, like I said, that's just stuck on stupid and waiting on dumb to come. That was federal dollars that he just left on the table. And I was just glad that he was spending more time with his lovely wife.
Gwen Moore, our fine friend and Congresswoman of Milwaukee. Gwen, Scott Walker is no longer the governor, but the maps instituted by Scott Walker and sort of re-enshrined under this current legislative gerrymander, these maps have really killed small d democracy in the state of Wisconsin. One of my colleagues today wanted to talk about propositions. I said the Dems don't get any propositions through, not on a state level. But Gwen, the Biden administration and the former Congress delivered, and we got a lot of money coming to the state of Wisconsin, especially in renewable energies. My understanding, like 11 gigawatts of new solar and wind energy and 22,000 jobs coming down the pike to the state of Wisconsin, Gwen. They can't deliver on the state level, but on the federal level, the Biden administration has delivered for Wisconsin, have they not, Gwen?
They certainly have, and you want to know, I think that's going to inure to the benefit of the Democrats come 2024. Some of the problems that people say they just can't see or feel the impact of what Biden has done. If you live in a red state, the state governors are in charge of the money. So, very often, they won't apply the money in a way that the poorest people, I was remembering this being in Mississippi, can really feel the impact. Thinking about how, the water drama in Jackson and millions of dollars being sent to Mississippi that they appropriate in other ways. Well, in Wisconsin, thank God we've got Tony Evers. Even though we have been under the subjection of Republicans who have, of course, tried to kneecap Tony in every way that they can. And I tell you, his experience, his cool head, his savvy has really gotten us through a lot. To be a governor, a Democratic governor, with both houses being Republican and one in the Senate, I believe, has a supermajority. He has been a miracle worker under those circumstances.
Indeed. My Congresswoman, I'm sorry, Gwen, go ahead.
Yeah, in a year's time, I think Wisconsin is going to be in a real good position to pull it out for Joe Biden again.
My Congresswoman Gwen Moore, for just a few more minutes. Gwen, the government scheduled to shut down a week from Friday. It's coming real quick. What are your thoughts? What do you see happening? How do you think this is going to play out?
Well, I'll tell you, I'm sitting here now. We're going back into session at 9:15 Eastern time to try to finish off the financial services appropriations bill. The Republicans have decided that they're going to do, a year's worth of work, in 2 or 3 weeks, particularly after they squandered 3 weeks trying to find a speaker. And so, they're keeping us up, Monday to Friday, every week, all day and into the night, into early morning hours. And because they're putting together their own appropriations bills with all kind of ridiculous amendments we've had to vote on. Delete the salary of XYZ employee or reduce this $1, and just ridiculous, just evidence that they can't govern. And at the end of that, we're going to have to get it to the Senate, and the Senate is going to have to clean it up and send us a better bill. Else, their bills, as hard as we're working on them, they will not see the light of day. They have demonstrated their unworthiness to run the House of Representatives, and we're waiting on Hakeem Jeffries.
Gwen, do you think the American people have noticed? I mean, certainly it's been chaotic, but do you think this just fades from memory, or do you think this affects the electorate come next year, especially?
Well, I think that the Republicans have really become extremely aggressive in calling us woke, because I think that they really prefer everybody to be asleep and not to be paying attention to what's happening. But apparently people are paying attention. They're paying attention to all of these outrageous abortion bills that are popping up all over the country, and they're saying no in every which way. They are seeing when they learn more about, they're going to hear a lot about the government saving plans of Republicans, and it's really going to involve cutting benefits directly to them, including having an impact on Social Security and Medicare. They're going to be able to see close up and personal that these people are concerned only about the wealthy and not about, Joe Lunchbucket. People, they want to ignore the environment, continue to block all efforts to move our economy into a post-fossil fuel economy. And in the meantime, Americans are going to continue to experience these awful weather events. And, it's just hard to ignore that, who's working on what.
Gwen Moore, thank you so much for joining the Devil's Advocates today. We're up against a hard break. We'll catch up real soon, Gwen.
Thank you, Congresswoman.